What's up, goobers? Today, got something kind of cool for you. I'm going to show you what a director does to break down a script. And I'm going to show you a couple of tips along the way, so stick around. So this is actually one of my feature film scripts, and it's one I've been working on for a long time, and it's one I'm genuinely excited about actually trying to produce. But this is the script. It's 109 pages long, and it's presented in the way that everybody wants to read your script, which is brass rivets and single page format. The hardest thing with making notes on a script is having it on dual sides of the page, because then if you poke through, you're ruining the next page. So first thing we want to do is identify a scene that we want to break down, and it's actually a little bit into the script. It's a conversation between two characters, which a conversation between two characters happens in every movie, but can be done in so many different ways. You think about it in Oppenheimer versus like Murder on the Orient Express. I'm going to read through it really quick, and then we're going to break it down. Interior, Barbara's house, bathroom. Jake sticks his head under the sink and begins running water through his coarse, dirty hair, knocking a few of Barbara's decorative soaps off kilter in the process. How was work and stuff? Barbara, fine. Listen, I need to... Jake, just fine? That doesn't sound good. No, it was good. That's more like it. A lot of good happening around here. So right off the bat, we can see that there's some sort of tension. His mom, Barbara, wants to say something to him, but she's having a hard time getting it out. And frankly, he doesn't want to hear anything that is negative. Moving on. Jake pulls his head out of the sink, puts a towel off the wall, and begins to dry his hair. What do you mean, Barbara says. Yeah, the shoot was good. Work was good. Wayne, I tell ya, has real potential as a character person. Jakey. There's lots of great character moments. I just think it's really going to work. Jakey. I could really see this thing being something big. You know, a lot of people love it. Jacob Bronson. Jake pauses, pulling the towel down around his neck. What's wrong, Mom? Barbara gathers herself. Nothing. She leans back against the doorframe. I'm thrilled for you. I really am. I think this is such a great thing for you, and I'm excited you're excited. Honey, I just want you to be realistic. Jake, I am being realistic. I'm working to make sure something happens. You always said to work hard and believe in yourself. I know what I said, Jakey. Things like this don't tend to last. Enjoy it while you can, but think of other options. But Mom, this is such a great option. There's so much growth potential. If we can get more views, there could be brand deals and sponsorships, Jacob. She slowly takes the towel from around his head. I hope so. She kisses him on the cheek and walks out of the bathroom. So right here, you have a conflict between two characters that want different things. And the job of the director, I think, is to look at a scene and look at the character dynamics and figure out what are the wants of the scene. What I think Jake wants right here is to be heard. He wants his mom to be excited about what he's excited about. He basically is caught up in this plot to gain a bunch of views and be really famous on the internet. That's the Cliff Notes version of this part of the script. Barbara is obviously very cautious about Jake's future, and his optimism is probably something that she's seen before and is getting a little wary about. So tip number one for breaking down a scene like this: color pencils. One, because you don't want to do it in pen, and two, I'm a color guy, so this helps me keep everything organized. So what we want to do first is identify the moments in the scene where things change. This is called a turn. Jake is sticking his head under the thing, blah, blah, blah. I was working stuff, fine, listen, I need to, just fine. So we could say that the first turn is Barbara entering the room. And I'm gonna put my turns, or like my notes of what happens, on the left side, because on the right side, I'm gonna be building out the different shot selections that we're gonna have. So Jake pulls his head from out under the sink, pulls a towel over the wall, and begins to dry his hair. What do you mean? This is probably another turn right here. Jacob won't listen to Barbara at this point, and she finally yells out, Jacob Bronson. Here's another turn. So Jacob pauses, pulling the towel down around his neck. What's wrong, Mom? Barbara gathers herself. Nothing, she leans back against the doorframe. Basically, halfway through this segment, he says, but you told me you have to work hard and believe in yourself. And she's like, I want you to think of other options. So he's kind of combating her, right? He's trying to basically justify why he feels what he feels. She is trying to more or less undo the optimistic damage that she's given him. So at the end here, we have another turn where she finally basically says, I hope things work out, which from a mother's perspective is basically like, I don't think it's going to work out, but maybe it will, She gives up trying to convince him otherwise. So these are the 4 turns in the scene. So we have the beginning where the relationship is dissonant. Then you have the conflict actually happening. And then you have the conflict becoming more personal, and then you have the conflict being resolved. So what we can do as a director is decide how we're gonna tell each segment of the script. I don't love coverage all that much. However, I know that for actors, it works easier if you can get them through an entire scene. So as the filmmaker, you just kind of have to preemptively decide like what part of the coverage are you going to use when. For actors, stopping and starting it can get very tiring very quickly, as opposed to actually running through the scene, running through all of the emotions, all of the dialogue all at once. So basically we're gonna shoot, because it's such a short scene, I intend to shoot the whole scene multiple times, or at least break it in half. So shoot 2 coverages of this segment and then shoot these 2 coverages. At the beginning of the scene, we have a couple of insert shots, right? He sticks his head under the sink and begins to run the water. So we could probably see something like, extreme close-up, sink. So we could start with that, knocking a few of Barbara's, just like decorative soaps off. It could be the same thing. So these 2 things could probably be shot pretty similarly at the same time. So here we're gonna go to a different type of coverage. So here, we're going to break down this segment. The way I see it in my head is they are individually shot because they are separate from each other. So when we're cutting back and forth, there isn't a lot of common ground between them. When characters share the frame, the conflict seems to be a little bit more obvious. If you think about Heat, the characters are always filmed in what's called a dirty frame, where one of the other characters is occupying a segment of the frame to increase the obvious conflict that's happening between the characters. And we'll get to that in a second. So essentially, between breaks, we have coverage 1, coverage 2, coverage 3, and coverage 4. So going back to coverage 1, they are going to be filmed individually, which means the camera is going to be inside the action. We're going to film Jake first, and then we're going to film Barbara. And the camera is going to be in between the 2 actors. So these are ISOs. So basically, the action changes when he pulls the towel off his head. So now we're in a state of conflict. So how do we want this conflict to be perceived? This is where I believe the camera goes over the shoulder. So we're going to say over, and we are going to say over. So again, these are probably similar setups to these scenes earlier, but they're just longer lenses, or they're closer to the actors. So again, this is one of those things where having actors run through the entire scene works because they're pretty similar in setup. She finally says Jacob Bronson, and we switch to coverage 3. And coverage 3, I see this as very much like a breaking point, but I want both characters to be in the frame, and I want the camera to slowly dolly in. So this is going to be a 2 shot. And what I'd like to end up with is what's called a 50-50 shot. Basically, where both characters are in profile, looking at each other. That gives her the ability to grab the towel off of him and walk out of the room, and we get to see that. Again, for coverage 4, it's such a short little piece. I would probably say that these are overs. We are just seeing their faces, because this is the most emotional part right here at the very end. So again, when you're breaking down a scene, you don't have to know everything, but you need to know where the important moments of the scene are. Even if you just go through and break down the turns, like where the tone of the scene changes or where the power dynamic changes. There's a really great one in the first Mission Impossible where Tom Cruise is having a really cordial conversation with a secret agent, and then he realizes something is not as it seems, and the camera cuts to a different type of coverage. And we start getting all these wacky Dutch angles and start getting all this kind of extreme cinematography to back that up. Where I would go from here is I would take this understanding into a shot list. And again, it's one of those things where if you're going through an entire coverage, there are going to be multiple shots when you look at the finished movie, but in reality, it might be 2 setups. Like for this scene right here, in scene 1, this is 2 setups. There's a single on Jake, and there's a single on Barbara. And then in C2, there's 2 setups. There's an over-the-shoulder on Barbara, and there's an over-the-shoulder on Jake. And basically, these are 4 setups, and you get most of the way through the scene. And then you can spend time getting the dolly in, so you have a blocking change here. He stands up and puts the towel around his neck. That could be tracked in a 2-shot. That could be tracked in a single. You could carry over the single from C2 into this scene, and he could do something interesting as an actor until he walks to meet Barbara at the doorframe. Again, this isn't like a super tight thing that you have to do, but just going through it and finding the moments where things need to change can definitely improve your scene. And using colored pencils is really good because I'm gonna erase this and probably do something different, but this is what I was feeling today. That's just how I feel going through this script. Anybody that knows me knows that I've been wanting to make films since I was a little kid, and I've been making short films for most of my life. And I feel like it's time to finally make a feature film. So hit that subscribe button if you're interested in my filmmaking journey as I work to produce my first feature film. Thanks.